Do you love everything football? You've come to the right place. Welcome to Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin.
What is going on, guys? Thank you for joining us. It is the 25th of January 2016 and this is only our second show of the year. We are back after a 2-week vacation and it was nice. I sunned it up on my front step. But we have a guest. I thought we've been away for 2 weeks. There's only one man we can get on. My morning stalker. Oh, yeah, it's the other way around. But good morning, Mr. Matt.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm good, how are you?
I'm good. People recognise the voice as Second Yellow Card if you follow Football Manager. If you don't, then you're probably on the wrong channel for most of the week. But yeah, you're here to talk football, sir.
I am.
Hope you're ready.
I'm always ready. I was born sort of next to ready.
Just to warn you, there'll be no Fabio, no Everton, no Carlos talk.
Oh.
Just in case you're going to talk about them specific footballers.
Can I talk about Salvi instead?
Sure. When we go to youth football and you go, oh, I've got a great one.
Oh, I've got a great one.
So there's some Football Manager talk before we've even got started. Did you have a nice New Year, sir?
Yeah, it was alright. I assume like most of us, we all drank copious amounts of various beverages and had a lovely old time.
Nope.
Nope.
I looked after my kids, went to bed early, and was very miserable posting on Facebook how much I hated my neighbours for putting fireworks off.
I think I actually saw that while I was drinking.
Yep. You're welcome. I cheered everybody's New Year. I literally got a message off, well, I'm going to make it sound like loads of people love me. I got a message off 3 people complaining about my Grinch attitude. But we also have Colin here. Good evening, sir.
How are you?
I'm good. This 2-week vacation's done well. I'm fresh, ready to get back into football talk.
Nice. You have all your smooth transitions ready to go?
Hopefully. And we couldn't do a show without having the most miserable man in the world with us. Hello, Ryan.
Maybe I had to be such
Yep, he's
happy
hung up.
person. I am jovial.
I love the fact his signal cut off as if he hung up. But yeah, we prepared. That's right, Matt. We have topics.
Oh.
And you can even see them on my screen. The viewers can't. They're probably looking now going, we can't.
I can, but I'm going to try and find the screen. There it is.
There it is. So they're not in order, so we will be bouncing around. Now, I'm going to go to the present. Screw going into the past. We've got 2 weeks worth of football to talk about, but we are going to go to the now. There's a deal in the middle of being finished, being finalised, and when I heard this today, my first thoughts were, what, we should go for him. Then I heard how much they were paying. So, I've heard 20, Ryan's heard 25 million pounds for Ramirez to leave Chelsea to go and play in China. So yeah, I think we'll go to our guest first. What were your thoughts when you heard that? In my opinion, someone who is still a leading Premier League midfielder is leaving.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about it until like roughly 9 seconds ago.
Surprise!
So this is like this is a beautiful surprise. That is a lot of money. Like, then again, it's Ramirez, but I suppose if a club like that is going to pry a player like Ramirez away from a club like Chelsea, they're going to have to pay through the nose, aren't they? But isn't that... I mean, okay, Chinese clubs have been signing some big players lately over the last sort of 18 months. They're obviously trying to really boost the reputation of the league in the same way that the MLS kind of did in the earlier days. I mean, they still kind of are now, but I think a lot of leagues have done this. The A-League in Australia did, and I believe the Indian Super League had a similar sort of system, but that is a lot of money. But then, is Ramirez really getting that much game time for Chelsea at the moment? Like, I've watched a few Chelsea games as of late, and I haven't seen his name mentioned particularly. I don't know if he played or what, but I don't think he's played that much for Chelsea lately, which is strange because to me, I consider him a really good player.
I think his work rate is the first thing that comes to mind. In my opinion, anyway, when you first think of him, you kind of think of how he busts his ass in a game, doesn't he? You see him getting up and down constantly. I just think it's quite strange. I think if the stats are right down looking at, he's played 12 times, Matt, this season.
It's strange. He always struck me as the type of John Obi Mikel type of player, but with a little bit more craft.
John Obi Mikel style of player, but can actually go past the halfway line.
Yeah, and people don't go, oh, is he still here every time he comes on?
He's one of them players who you kind of look back and think, Do you remember when Man United battled it for Mikel? I bet they kind of look now and go, yeah, I'm glad we kind of just let Chelsea have him.
Yeah, I'm glad we went for Anderson instead.
Oh. We could do a pick the worst signings of the last 10 years. But yeah, I think it's an interesting deal, and I think, as you say, China are really going for it, and they are a developing country, but I mean, is this what's wrong with football at the minute, Colin, this type of thing?
Well, I think, when sport reaches a particular level and you get somebody like a China who says, you know what, we want our league to become one of the best in the world, you're going to end up with this. I mean, I think if it wasn't for the salary cap and some of the other rules, you'd probably see some similar type deals going on with like MLS clubs trying to yank guys like this. So it's kind of hard to say, is this bad for the game? Is it bad for him? Is it bad for the rest of England that somebody's pulling over to become a hero in China? I don't know. I struggle a little bit. I can see sort of all sides of it. I mean, hey, good for him if he goes. I can't imagine it's going to be a very smooth transition for him unless, some dialect of Chinese happens to be in his particular arsenal. I imagine it's going to be a bit of a tough transition, but you know what? If he goes over, makes a few bucks, has a good time, plays well, more power to him.
Well, I don't think it's a hard language to learn because my son was watching a TV show and he learned how to say the word cloud quite quickly.
That's all you need, isn't it?
Well, exactly. It was like a show for 5-year-olds, and he randomly kept saying the word cloud in Chinese.
I mean, you're basically fluent then.
Let's be honest, after a couple of days of hearing that, I almost threw him into a cloud. But
you're basically qualified to be a weatherman in China now.
Exactly. I mean, well, it's pretty much all they have, isn't it?
What, weather?
Or mist.
China's main export, weathermen.
So, I think the fact I've asked Colin, is this what's wrong with the game? I think I want to actually ask you, Ryan. Is the likes of China coming up, and we know the effort they're putting into youth football with the likes of Beckham being an ambassador and stuff, and they're now trying to bring them big names into China to kind of help motivate the youngsters. Is this going to help the game and to kind of stop, instead of players like Ramirez maybe just going to Italy or Germany or Spain, they're now going to different leagues, so it's kind of making it more of a global attraction, like Xavi in Qatar, for example.
Yeah, I reckon it will happen in a lot of these. I'm not going to say down in the dumps. That's the word that pops into my head. China isn't a down in the dumps country, but these nations that aren't really known for their football, we could say. I think it's going to happen. These countries will come out there and say, we'll find people that can invest, and there's the money. We'll go out and buy loads of players just to increase their reputation, rather than have the likes of Spain, England, Italy, Germany just taking over football, trying to attract people to come and watch a different brand of football in a different country that isn't known for football. It's going to happen, I think. Football's going to take over the world everywhere.
Yeah,
I just did some amazing. I did some amazing actions there with my hands. People sitting outside are going to think I'm quite strange.
It's alright. We could sense the actions. Matt was mimicking.
I was blown off my chair.
See, exactly. But one thing that kind of, whenever I hear these kind of deals, the first thing that comes to mind is the financial fair play situation in the likes of England, for example. Should that be a global thing? Should all clubs in every country obey rules? But then you've got to kind of think, well, no doubt Chinese clubs get some insane amounts of sponsorship, possibly from Chinese, obviously, companies. So, I mean, Matt, it's a bit of an off-topic type thing, but should the fair play thing be a worldwide thing?
I think that the problem with the fair play thing is that the rules just seem to be they don't really seem to be enforcing them that well. And when they do, the fines and punishments are sort of slaps on the wrist or equivalents of. So is it really... I don't see the point in having it in the first place. I mean, football in itself kind of follows a sort of free market capitalist approach to, if you look at the economics of football. And I think if you start to take that away by trying to impose those sorts of rules, I think it could actually start to destroy the sort of microeconomy that is football transfers. And I don't know if that would be a good thing or a bad thing for the game, but I personally don't think it'd be a good thing, really. I think that for those sort of rules to be put in place, a club or a country like China and all the other countries that would probably want to spend money, so you're looking at Qatar and the Saudi Arabian League and whatnot, they're not going to want to agree to those kind of things because their main draw at the moment in order to bring in these players is money. Because if you look at Xavi I think it's Qatar that Xavi plays in, is he really going to go there if they're not offering him the money that they are? If he's offered the same money in Qatar as he is to go play in, I don't know, Italy, then you think, he's always going to go to Italy. But these clubs really only have money as a sort of selling point at the moment. And that's fine because that's all they've got. Everyone has to start somewhere. But I guess from their point of view, they really want... fans in these countries, in China and whatnot, generally don't support local clubs. I'm not saying that they all don't, but for the most part, that seems to be how things are. They often support Manchester Uniteds and Chelsea's and Barcelona's and Real Madrid's and Juventus's and whatnot. And I think what these clubs are trying to do by bringing in these names is to sort of sway those fans that were Man United fans to say, hang on, come and watch, Shanghai Shenhua or someone like that, or, come down and watch, I can't think of another Chinese named club, but you know what I mean?
Beijing.
That's the one. Beijing United.
Yeah. Nailed it. So, obviously, we have a very large Chinese fan base who listen to Beyond the Touchline. So, first off, I want to apologise for Ryan basically calling it a down in the dumps country. Then Matt for basically calling your Glory supporters.
To be fair, if there are any weathermen out there that I have offended, I am sincerely sorry.
Yes, and if you do want to chat, my son will speak to you and tell you what a cloud is. In fact, actually, I think he's forgot the word, to be fair, so it was quite a while ago. And the show was dreadful, I kind of banned it. It's literally one of the worst shows I've ever seen in my life. And that says a lot, because he watches some shit. So moving on, we're going to talk about youth football, and we might as well just quickly say the likes of China and countries like that are putting so much into youth football. It's going to be interesting to see how they develop in the years, because look, the population of China, if they can get it right in terms of training the kids and start getting through the second and third generations to kind of come through and know the routines and know the training methods and know how to play football better, they could be a force. The same with India. If India can pump the money into the right places and train players, I mean, these humongous countries could be holding on to some very interesting talent. But I think the main part of the youth football discussion is my growing frustration with the English league when you watch it, and the refusal to give academy players a chance, or just youth players in general. And I mean, I just want to kind of revisit it. We spoke about it a bit with Matt, and just last time you were on, or the time before, definitely before. There's a vague description. So, yeah, I mean, it frustrates me now. I don't even know where to start. So I kind of hope you can get the ball rolling, Matt, with some youth football discussion.
Yeah, I mean, with youth football, I think a lot of people sort of take a very kind of short-sighted approach to bringing through youth players, and that's sort of generally one of those things that's propagated through the media, where they'll say, we need to have these rules that say that each Premier League team must play a certain number of players under a certain age, or youth players, homegrown or English players, whatever, and they must play them or whatever. But then, to me, that doesn't suggest that the teams should then go out and try and bring through these players. What it actually does is the teams go out and buy those players from other teams where they were actually playing, and then put them in their squads and then don't play them. Key examples being Patrick Roberts and whatnot, who obviously I've still got a bee in my bonnet about, but as I would do.
Stay calm.
But, like, he's not the only example. Like, I want to talk to you guys about a guy called John Bostock. Does anyone remember that name?
Oh, I do.
Yeah.
Wasn't he playing in Thailand last or something?
No, he actually plays in the Belgian 3rd Division.
No, I'm sorry, I was close.
Well, yeah, no, sort of. They share some of the letters. It might be
close in the alphabet.
Yeah, B to T.
Yeah,
but
definitely within the 26.
Yeah, he broke through at Palace as a very, very young player. I think he was 15 when he made his first team debut for Palace in the Championship, and he made a decent impact. And he was playing some games for Crystal Palace, which is, quite an achievement for any 15-year-old playing in the 2nd division of English football, which is, a reasonably high standard. And he then got himself his big move to Spurs. I don't know how much the extra transfer fee was. It probably wasn't that large due to his age or whatever. But he played a grand total of 0 games for Spurs over his actual spell in there, and he spent loans
5 years.
5 years. 5 years at Spurs, having not played a single match for them. And then he eventually was released, went to, I think it was Royal Antwerp, and then he moved to another side in Belgium, I believe. And he's rebuilding his career there, because he's still not exactly old. But my point is that if he stays playing... 24 years old. If he stays... Obviously, we don't know exactly what would happen, as we can never really tell. But you've got to think that if he's got that amount of talent that he allegedly had at the time, and if it was enough for Spurs to go out and sign him, then maybe if he just stayed at Palace in the first place, he would be... playing Premier League football right now, either with Palace or with another team. And the same sort of thing applies to players like Scott Sinclair when he made that move to, God, who was it? I think it was Chelsea? I can't remember. And Wilfred Zaha is another one who, although he seems to have sort of seen the light, he's not as young, of course, but playing well for Palace. Palace seem to be really susceptible to this type of thing, but moves to Man United, has a terrible time there, and eventually moves back to Palace in the end anyway, and is sort of rebuilding his career once again. But I just think that if there was less of players having to do that, and instead just playing for their clubs, do you really think Patrick Roberts is going to play for City over the next 3 or 4 seasons? People keep saying, I talked about this before, and people said to me, oh, it's fine, he's made a couple of substitute appearances this year. Brilliant.
Oh, score.
Wow. He's basically a competition winner then, isn't he? Whereas if he played for Fulham this season, yeah, okay, we'd probably get our asses handed to us week in, week out, but he'd be getting first-team football of a reasonably high standard. And sure, if he wants to move on later when he's 21 years old or 22, and he's really sort of bedded himself in, like Will Hughes is doing at Derby, and those types of players have done. And to a certain extent, what Dele Alli did before he moved to Spurs, although he is slightly younger than those. Dele Alli's sort of the exception that proves the rule in a way, really, because he got a lot of game time under his belt. Spurs then picked him up, and they've actually put him in, and they are actually playing him. So credit to Spurs for that. They really have actually taken this sort of mantle on this year and are actually playing a lot of these young English players, and not sort of as a token gesture, because they're good and they're giving them a chance to be good. But yeah, I've talked for ages now.
So here's a question from you. So processing what you're thinking. So I've always sort of been a fan of what what the Portuguese and German and Spanish sides have of the B teams playing in lower tiers, but competing in lower tiers. So let's say if they tweaked and said, the Premier League guys can take their reserves, and rather than playing in just reserve games, so these guys show up and end up rotting away in some distant locker room. If they had a B team that was league, start them in League 2, whatever, but they can never get promoted beyond the championship, and these guys get into something like that, and okay, so maybe you transfer to United, but the United B squad is playing League 1, League 2 championship. Do you think that changes the picture any?
The reason I'd say no is because, firstly, the logistics of that are pretty sort of out there, in the sense that in order for these clubs, I mean, it depends on how many of these reserve teams there would be. That would be surely at the expense of 10 to 15 different league clubs places. But also, I mean, it's like everyone's like, who cares about Mansfield Town? Let's put Chelsea B in there instead. And firstly, I don't know how many people would actually go and watch these games, but also that's not really the point. But the way I look at it is this: if a player of that age or whatever is going to go play for Man United's B team at that level in, say, League 1, why not just play for a League 1 team?
No, I could. Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with you. I think it works more in some of the smaller leagues because they need fillers to kind of fill the pyramid per se. Whereas like in England, doesn't necessarily need the filler. But I'm almost curious as how much, and I know it sounds lousy, but how much the glitz of the name sort of messes with some of these kids.
Oh, absolutely. I don't think it's so much the name. I think it's that they sell them on false promises of big name stardom, because I think the club's sort of taken this approach of hoarding these youth talent because they need them to fill out those quotas in their squads. We've all done it on FM.
Chelsea.
Oh, sure.
Whoa, hang on. Whoa, hang on. Calm yourself down, Matt. I've not been that high up. Don't need them sort of quotas.
You have homegrown quotas in League 2.
Yeah, but 99% of my team's there. I didn't sign players just for that quota, let me tell you that.
No, but you have the same problem. Okay, so fine, it's not necessarily a giant issue at the moment, but the problem still exists.
Now, going back to the question you put across, Colin, in terms of reserve teams being able to play in the league structure, I actually think it would be a good idea, but I don't want to see it. And why do I not want to see it? Because the English league system is so much stronger than anybody else.
No, I
You
agree.
put a second tier side from Spain or Italy or Germany even to an extent. I would say Germany's the second strongest.
Germany
in
is
terms
sort of
second structure.
the other country that could possibly do that in terms of
Yeah.
matching. Like, if you look at some German second tier teams, like I think Kaiserslautern are a second tier team in Germany, and even St. Pauli
Yeah.
and Red Bull Leipzig, like
They could hold their own.
they could probably hold their own against someone like a Burnley or a Hull City. But if you were to put Hull City up against a team like Albino Leffe,
yeah.
they would absolutely batter them. You'd have to think.
I agree. And I think when you go all the way down, you've got Exeter playing Liverpool, taking them to a replay. You've got Oxford knocking out Swansea, and it wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a fluke when that happened. Oxford were just outstanding
Lamar
in that
Roof was
game.
on another level.
I watched that game and I watched it from, I think it was about 40 minutes, mainly because I messed up the kickoff time. And I just could not believe what I was watching in terms of the ability, the quality of Oxford. And I think if we then say, well, Accrington and Stanley, who are they? They go into the Conference North to facilitate a B team, as you say. Is it going to hinder the FA Cup? Is it going to hinder the strength and depth of the English league system? Because I know what you were saying, these players, if you want to play for League One side, then play for League One side. I don't think some of these people who play in the reserve teams of the big clubs, the League One sides wouldn't even want them because they don't have the work rate, they don't have the determination I think
They
needed.
think they've made it.
Yeah, exactly. They kind of turn up and they're not cleaning the boots like in the don't want to say it, but in the olden days.
They're not
you used to have to-
YTSs anymore.
Yeah, you used to have to put a shift. I mean, when the class of '92, when you hear what they had to go through, but then they say how they stamped it out because they didn't think it was fair on the youngsters to have to put up with it. But then now when they talk back on it, they kind of say, well, it kind of made the men. You listen to I'm a massive fan of Fletch and Sav on a Saturday morning. I absolutely love it. People give it so much stick on Twitter, I see, on a morning and stuff.
I would be one of those people.
I'm not joking you, I genuinely love it. I think the football talk, when you actually sit down and just enjoy the football talk between them, it's fantastic. And I'll tell you what, the last few weeks they've got guests on who used to play with Robbie Savage. Oh my god, what a little shit he was. They go through the abuse, the tricks, the trickery on the training ground. The players would come back and Robbie Savage would have destroyed something or set them up. That type of thing, it doesn't happen now, does it? All you read about is a reserve team player spending £1 million on a house because he's just turned 19.
I think the comparison is that do you think that a player like Ravel Morrison could have existed 20 years ago?
No, I
Both
think
in
it'd been
attitude
destroyed.
and yeah, genuinely. And there are some bad sides to that because at least in terms of the good parts of his game is that he was one of those players that was actually willing to try new things, and a bit like how Paul Gascoigne was back in the day. Like he's one of those players that actually wasn't sort of cut from the British mould as so called. And I don't see that as a good thing. The whole British mould thing. Britain need less players that fit that mould. But at the same time, he also has the bad side of things, which is the kind of the fancy Dan, I've got my first name on the back of my shirt type of thing. Like, what? How do you get that?
Yeah.
Why does he have the first name on the back of his shirt? Like, what has he proven that? Not that you have to prove yourself to get that, because why would you? But like, it really does seem very, very strange when I first saw that.
I mean, you've got to. I'm going to bring Ryan in. Ryan, can you imagine? It's at the peak of the ability. You've got Paul Scholes and you've got Roy Keane in the middle. You've got Gary Neville at the back. You've even got the likes of Rio Ferdinand, Jaap Stam lining up. Peter Schmeichel behind them. You imagine all of them in the same team that exact minute. Then you go Ravel Morrison turns up at the training ground, or just some sort of modern day knobhead turns up and just you can imagine. Genuinely, I think they would just get destroyed by him.
Big time Charlie, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at individual characteristics here. Rafael Morrison was a very interesting individual. I think I'd have loved to have managed him.
I love how Ryan mixes the words instead of just saying he was a knobhead.
Well, yeah, I'm not as swinging hammers as I keep saying to you lately. I'm a bit more polite. Let's put it that way.
Well, let me ask you in a polite way then, Ryan. what's wrong with modern youth football at the minute? Then, in your opinion, after you've sat back there as we've just been talking, what's the issue specifically in England? What's the issue at the minute?
See, I look at it from two aspects. I think English fans they look at it from the international aspect. Our international team are never very good in tournaments because we don't have the youth coming through. But the issue there is the top teams in England, they want success. And to get success, you need to get the best players. To get the best players, you need to spend money. And that money usually goes on youth players that, if you follow the Chelsea philosophy, they'll spend the money, they'll buy the player, he'll sit in the under-21s. He may or may not reach the first team. If he doesn't, they'll just go on and sell him. It doesn't really matter. Take from the aspect, we'll go with the second yellow card, of Patrick Roberts going to Man City. When is he going to play in Man City's first team in the Premier League? It could be a very long time. He may not actually play at all, and Man City will just end up selling him. That is the issue. The issue is the success that the top teams want requires the top players to come in, and the youth players will just go, you're not wanted because our fans want success, and the international football will just have to wait.
I mean, am I right? Patrick Roberts is about 17.
He's made one appearance.
So you think, let's using Football Manager for our knowledge, he is going to class as not just a homegrown, but a homegrown academy player, isn't he, within a couple of years?
Yes.
Yeah.
After 3 years at the club, under the age of 21, trained there 3 years. That's why they've signed him. And they've signed with the hope he will develop into a first-team player. With the hope. But also with the fact that it doesn't really matter because they've managed to fill a slot. Mm-hmm. And it's so sad because, Matt, you've seen him play and the ability he has.
Well, people touted him as like one of the next big hopes. Like, I think it was the under-18s tournament, I think it was out in Malta, not last summer, but the summer before. But there was a lot made of people like Ruben Loftus-Cheek and
don't get me started on him.
And there's another one as well, another Chelsea player, and I can't remember his name. But as well as people like
Graham?
Ryan Leds. There was another one.
Was it not that? But is it Barker, the central midfielder, who was just
Lewis,
so good for
Lewis Barker?
Yeah, there's Dan Crowley and people like that. But it was Roberts that stuck out in that tournament. But he never got the press coverage, which was really, really strange, even though he scored the most goals or something. But anyway, that's not really the point. The fact is, he looked like the sort of like, I don't know if you actually have seen Roberts play, but like I watched the Fulham versus Chelsea FA Youth Cup final 2 years ago. He absolutely tore Chelsea apart. Like I know we lost like 6-5 or something in the end or whatever. That was bad defending on Fulham's part, which is just Fulham all over. But Roberts was absolutely outrageous. Like genuinely, at times he looked like Messi, and I'm saying that as a comparative sense. And like he looked like Messi compared to the other players. The way he just ghost past them, that low centre of gravity, and his dribbling ability and finishing on the end was outrageous. And that's at like 17 years old, or yeah, would have been 17 at the time. And to nurture that properly into something incredible, like fair enough, he would get kicked all over the place in the Championship, but then Messi gets kicked all over the place all the time in La Liga, and he had to learn that basically. But he learned ways around it, and I think that's why Messi's such a clever player. And obviously, I'm not really comparing the two of them, of course, but they have that same sort of style of play. Obviously, Messi's in a different league completely, but I just feel like at Manchester City, he will get good coaching. Make no mistake about that, but I think there's only so much you can do with coaching unless they're actually playing week in, week out. You know, he'll get a loan spell. I literally just Googled him, and there's rumours that he's going to go on loan to Celtic, which is fine. That's great. He'll get football there. But why not just play for Fulham?
Yeah,
because my guess would be the quality of football that he'd get at Fulham is significantly better than he's going to pick up in the Scottish Premier League.
Yeah.
Who was Celtic?
Well, I mean, Celtic are themselves probably around about the same level as some of those sides. However, the teams he'd be playing against are not.
Indeed.
And
right.
I think obviously, I think one of the things that they could do is start introducing like loan back clauses in these big deals. So they say, right, we'll buy Patrick Roberts from Fulham for £12 million. Great. But we'll put a clause in the deal that says that he's now loaned back for Fulham for 3 years. We still own the player, but you get to play it.
Do you know what I think it would never happen.
No,
this is going to be the most random thing I'm going to suggest ever. The Premier League or the English FA should make sure that all contracts between players have a clause in that if Man City buy a player for this amount of money, if they don't play him at least 50 times in them 3 years, apart from if a major injury happens, they have to fork out another 30 million or something. Something absurd to kind of say, look, you're spending this money on a young talent, you will play him.
I think that would kind of violate all kinds of contract law under sort of punitive damages as part of contracts, because I don't think anyone would agree to a contract like that. That's
Still
the
should
problem.
happen.
Yeah, but I think you could get around that just with loan back clauses.
Yeah.
Just you can do it on Football Manager all the time. A lot of the clubs that you buy players from suggest that sort of stuff. So I just don't see why more clubs don't use it. Like when Palace sold Zaha to Man United, they loaned him back to them for 6 months on the end of the deal, which was a good little start to that. But then, if that had been 2 years longer, maybe he'd still be playing for Manchester United, and maybe he'd be a much more rounded player, and they'd actually have a really complete footballer then. I don't know why more teams don't do that, but I guess the reason they don't do that is, of course, because if they're loaned back to those clubs, they can't count them as their homegrown quota, and that's, after all, the reason they're signing you in the first place.
Exactly. I think it's loads of things can happen, but also I think it needs to kind of work both ways. When you look at the likes of Barcelona, they sell players, but they make sure there's these clauses in, don't they, with what's his name, Deulofeu with Everton. If you want him back in the first year, it's so much. Second year, so much.
Yeah.
And third year, so much. It's like, do you know what? That is so freaking clever. It's ridiculous. But at the same reason, you think, how do you get away with that?
It's like a regret penalty, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like, right, we're going to loan you this guy, but if he does really well for you, we get to buy him for really cheap. But if you get him for another year, we'll pay slightly more.
But I mean, if you think about it, though, right, from a Barcelona's perspective, it's actually a really fantastic potential piece of business, right? So you take the player, bring him into your youth academy, right? Develop him till, call it 18, and at that point, right, from the club's perspective, they got to make a choice, right? Do I have room for you in my first team or not? And you can kind of gauge and say, you know what, I think the guy's got a lot of potential. But right now, I'm not going to let him sit and rot in my first team. I'm not going to kind of mail him down to the Bs. I want to see if he has the potential. So you can go out and find a club like an Everton, which, is effectively going to act as a youth academy, plus. So now you take a player like Deulofeu, send him out to Everton and go, look, Everton, you invest in him, you develop him, you make him better. I'm going to sit and watch. I'm going to give, if you do a fantastic job, he explodes, turns out fantastically, recognize I may come back and just pay you for that service and get the player back and put him in my first team. If not, we can slide the scale. But I think it's if you think about it from the selling club perspective, it's actually a fantastic piece of business that they can do, because you've effectively diversified, right? It's a no risk diversification of your players, so they're not on the hook. But if they do develop and you get a few more years to look at it, you can snag them back without having to worry about that intermediate investment.
I think it's, as you say, I think it's a fantastic deal. I think if I was Everton or an Everton fan, I would be literally twitching every window at the minute. Or if it was any player. But it's kind of the type of deal you'd want to put in if you're Fulham selling the likes of Roberts. You would say, well, look, you've paid 12 for him. How about if he doesn't develop how you wanted, we have first option in 3 years, not earlier, but in 3 years to buy him back at 8 million if he hasn't reached a certain quarter or something. Do you know what I mean, Matt? Like kind of he's failed, but we're willing to take him back type deal.
Yeah, well, it's similar to what they use in buyback clauses, isn't it? A lot of those. I mean, rarely do you actually see those buyback clauses involved, but some of the bigger deals generally have that sort of thing structured in. I think you don't always actually hear about it, because rarely do they ever get activated. I don't think I can actually think of the last time one of those buyback clauses was genuinely activated.
I think it's, I know there's one with Ozil at the minute. They keep talking about Real Madrid, but it'd be stupid to go back to Madrid, I think. Well, personally, anyway, I think it would be stupid. But, we're going to just move on to we're going to finish off talking youth by going over to Colin.
Sure.
Are you ready, sir?
Always.
It's been busy. You've been busy over the other side of that giant lake.
Yeah, well, every once in a while we get a little spunky over here.
No, settle down.
So yes, it's MLS Super Draft time. Has recently passed in our off time. So, for the rest of the world who, this is our version of the youth intake. And it was actually reasonably fascinating. So kind of overall, so some strange deals, some good things working out, and some things that we'll have to kind of see how the gamble works. So probably most interestingly, NYCFC traded away everything that they had to get the number one pick in the draft, who is Jack Harrison, who is a English kid from Stoke, who I believe came through Man United's youth system, who was playing college. Let me just double check. Wake Forest. So he was playing college at Wake Forest. So he's a midfielder that got drafted to Chicago, which is a very interesting maneuver for them. I think Chicago's in need of rebuilding, and I think they seem to be off the high-profile bailout DP, sort of bandwagon. So it'll be interesting to see him come out. Other interesting elements. Philadelphia had a very active draft. They had a ton of draft picks and actually drew. And this is an interesting one. Is they drafted two center backs out of Georgetown who play together, and start together in Georgetown, who are potential starters in MLS next year. So it's interesting to see if the chemistry carries over on that one. I'm actually very intrigued to see if the chemistry from college kind of pulls over from that. Chicago, probably the most interesting piece of business. So they had the number one allocation position in the draft, which they've managed to trade to the Colorado Rapids, who passed on probably the best center back.
Let me say.
Yeah.
He went to New England Revolution.
No.
Oh well, balls to it.
No.
What? Can I? I'm going to jump in. Can I ask, why did New England Revolution change their name to New England Loser Bet on Twitter? They also changed their logo to the Colorado Rapids.
I'm not 100% sure. I have to do some research.
I thought it was because they signed this first draft, because it was also with the picture saying they got their first pick.
No, so they got they got
it.
their pick in 10th overall. But the interesting move that seems to be going on with Colorado is they traded to the Chicago Fire for the number one allocation, the number one position in the allocation order. Which, if you're familiar with MLS rules, you'll know what it means. If you're not, it means if a U.S. men's national team player or former U.S. men's national team player is going to come into the league, that's the team with the first crack to sign them. All that is interesting because there is strong rumor that Alejandro Bedoya, who's a current U.S. men's national team midfielder, is coming back and wants to go to Colorado, and Colorado wants him. So the brilliance of Chicago's piece of business is they traded to get the best center back in left back in the draft. They picked him up at the number 4th pick, and as soon as Colorado uses that number 1 allocation spot, they'll be back to number 1. So they basically traded away for a couple of weeks that spot. So very interesting piece of business on that. For the most part, some of the busts. Orlando City didn't really have a good draft. San Jose, Toronto kind of came up bust. Montreal and Vancouver kind of came up bust. Dallas didn't have a particularly strong draft per se. They drew a sort of a young backup keeper, but they have a fantastic academy. They had the second most homegrown academy players in the starting 11 last year in MLS, behind the New York Red Bulls. So really interested to see what comes out of Dallas, since they're more of an academy-based team. Seattle, New York, and Houston did seem to do a decent job of bolstering their B teams in the USL, which will be interesting to see. And the interesting are sort of the two most, well, one is expected, the other one is sort of fascinating. So LA traded everything away and punted the draft, as they sort of always do. But Sporting Kansas City joined them this year, a team that is notorious for being just absolutely amazing at pulling fantastic youth products out of the draft. Traded everything away, so made people a little nervous to see what they're up to, or what, if there's changing philosophies going at probably the best youth pick crowd out there. But we'll have to see on that one. But overall, it was an interesting one. You can kind of get some wrap-ups of all the picks. It's a lot of guys from colleges that, if you're not super familiar with that, you're not going to really know. But some definite interesting, some really good defenders coming out high in the draft to teams that desperately needed defense. So should be a good year. Especially Chicago, Philadelphia, with especially with new coaching, a lot of changes in Philadelphia. So it should be interesting to see what happens there. So looking forward to the season.
Now, do you know what? When you talk about the youth recruitment, Matt, I've got to ask you: would something like a college system work in England somehow, instead of having the youth, where you still have the youth academies, but you can also have like a Manchester youth college, and you get to draft from there? Or I don't know.
The system is inbuilt into American sports in such a way that the entire system is sort of based around that as a sort of feeder mechanism to it. And it would take an entirely changing of the infrastructure in British sports to come about that kind of thing. And I just don't think that there'd be anyone who'd be for it, because I think a lot of the clubs would think to themselves, well, hang on a minute, we're producing these players. Why don't we get to keep them? Why do we have to draft them away to Man United?
Yeah, I think it's just when you hear Colin talking about it, or you watch, like, I follow MLS on Twitter, the amount of excitement and the buzz it builds, you get drawn into it.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I don't really watch the MLS, but I do watch the NHL, and obviously that has the same kind of draft system involved.
Yeah.
And I remember back in sort of the mid-noughties when the big draft came around, and it was Crosby and Ovechkin, and the huge buzz as to who would actually get who. That sort of thing.
I have no idea who them people
No, but
are.
Colin probably knows what I'm talking about.
Yep. No, it's exactly the same, right? I mean, to sort of see the roots. I mean, MLS does it because, it's what I forget when the NFL draft is. I think it's March, April, somewhere in there. I mean, it's an entire week where the country shuts down to see who's going to what teams. So I think MLS is trying to capitalize on that same sort of feel. And you're right. I think it's very much an ingrained way of how the school, collegiate, academic path is very much the way that youth gets into sport in the U.S. The academies, I mean, the teams do have academies, but they're not as potent as the school system. I think Jordan Morris, who just, I believe he's finally finished the deal with, I think he signed finally with the Seattle Sounders, is a great example, right? He was at school, Stanford, so, fantastic. Actually got a call up and played for the U.S. men's national team, played in a bunch of friendlies, scored a goal against Mexico. As an amateur. And I know there was a huge buzz around the world sitting there going, well, there's no way that, high caliber European teams would ever or the South American teams would ever have an amateur in the national team rankings, or ranks. But if you look at the way the system in this country works, like, it happens, and it's not really by accident, because effectively, if the manager, in this case, Klinsmann, wants to give a youth product an opportunity to see how they would react at that level, you're going to end up with an amateur on it, because they're going to be coming out of the university system in there. So, I understand that to some degree or other people get sort of weirded out and it doesn't make a lot of sense and creates some level of outrage, but it is our academy system. It's just a bigger, more diversified, sort of, non-homogeneous youth system, as opposed to, sort of the vertical academy systems that you see in Europe.
Yeah. Well, moving on to the final bit of American football news, American soccer news, American team news. Atlanta United, who have a very sexy badge. I noticed the MLS tweeted today, they've signed their first player, which I hope you know who he is. Alexander Tambakis. If you don't know who he is, we're going to move on very quickly. He's a goalkeeper.
I actually have no idea.
Brilliant. Moving on. Well, he's the first ever player to sign for Atlanta United. So if you want some of a quiz, Matt, there you go.
Well, to be fair, Atlanta doesn't come in until the 2017 season.
Yeah, so I can't think of what's he going to do.
Well, I hadn't started paying attention to the return of Atlanta and LA. I figured next.
Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on it for you.
The thing I'm most interested in this upcoming season to see is really the influence of Patrick Vieira on NYCFC.
Yeah, me too. But we're going to come back to Europe, so back over the big lake. And we're going to go to Ryan first, because Ryan, you're quite intrigued by PSG and their 24-point lead at the top of the league. Did I do it wrong, Colin?
Spot.
Yeah, it's just.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, it's showing that something is clearly wrong in France. We look back at the history. Monaco, they're still owned by a mega rich person, and they have some really good players. But PSG, they've overtaken the lead, and they're now leading by 24 points. You could basically say, "Here's the league. Get out of the literature, you shit."
They're going to say what? So
that would have been a very odd email from the French FA. Well, we're telling you, congratulations. Here's the League Cup. Now get out of here, you little shit.
Hey, Matt, I've got a question for you.
Shoot.
You know when you were Portsmouth?
Yep.
You know when you won the league?
Mm-hmm.
What did the email say? Did it mention getting out of the league, you little shit cat?
Yes. I think I said it twice, actually.
They said it bloody hell. There's Ryan emailing people again. Well, do you see why Ryan's quiet for so long with his amazing professionalism? The first chance he gets to talk about something and he starts abusing the cat. Okay, Ryan, back to your abuse of the French league.
Well, it's not really abuse. It's more what is happening. Something needs to happen where there's more competition in the league. PSG are leading at the moment by 24 points. We could say, and I'm hoping this is all going to be good, you may as well just give them the league trophy and go, here it is, you've already won the league, you're 24 points clear, you have an amazing team, I can't see you losing that many more games, here's the league trophy, have fun, the season's over.
I'll tell you what, man, that's one lick-ass email.
My emails are thoroughly professional. We should know.
I'll tell you what then. We'll go to you first, Ryan, for the next topic, because the PSG one is basically over and done. Well done, there's your title, we'll send you an email. So we'll stay with the Frenchman, Arsene in Arsenal. She's like, what I did there? He had to sacrifice an attacking player, and the crowd did not like it.
Yeah, so Per Mertesacker got sent off in the Chelsea game, and he took off Giroud just to bring on a defensive player. I didn't understand the decision. I don't know if anybody else agreed, but you took off potentially your best scoring threat just to put a defensive-minded player on. Could he have not taken off a midfielder and changed the formation around rather than taking off your forward?
I actually agreed with Wenger.
Yeah.
You agree?
At the time when I saw it, I thought to myself, I heard the booing and I thought to myself, I actually understood why he did it, because in my mind it's what I would have done. Purely because I think Giroud's just come back from an injury, from what I know, and he wasn't going to be able to see out the full 90 minutes, which meant that they would have had to have used a substitute on him later rather than getting him off now. But also, if I'm going to have to play counter-attacking against Chelsea, which you'd have to do with 10 men already against Chelsea with the way they were about to set up, I would want Theo Walcott leading that line as opposed to Olivier Giroud.
Yeah, I think the only thing I disagreed with it, because I heard an interview they were talking on U.S. radio this morning about the move, and I thought I was okay with the move and his rationale that he wanted Walcott on the field for the pace, for the counterattack, and I was okay with that. The part that bugged me was that he left him wide on the wing and let Ozil sort of lead the line in the middle, because that's not the position that Ozil really is, right? He's not a line leader. He's the hangback creative force. So I wondered if the only thing I would have thought of differently was a way to get Walcott into the middle to use his speed to lead the line. But I thought it was an okay move.
I think I can understand that the fans maybe said, well, he can hold the ball up. But as Matt said, was he going to last a full 90 minutes? You want pace up there, you want energy.
I guess my argument would be, if he's holding the ball up, who's he holding the ball up for?
Exactly. You can't take Walcott off. You can't give him the captain's armband and then take him off like early doors. I think it's that's a soul destroying moment as it is, let alone if you got the captain's armband to hand over. I think it's just one of them things, and the crowd did applaud the team at the end of the game, which was nice because they did work their asses off. Fair play to Chelsea. It's like watching me play FM. They're very solid at the back. 5-5 definitely was used there. So I was fairly impressed. But we've run out of time. Fantastic show. First one back after a couple of weeks off. If you are listening on SoundCloud or iTunes, remember to hit that review. The more reviews, the higher up the table we go. Hey, we'll get back in the iTunes charts. You never know. I want to thank Matt for being on.
No problem.
Appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to come and chat with us. I want to thank Colin, who left the Big Apple to quickly rush back.
No problem. Glad to be here as always.
Ryan, have fun with your cat this evening, sir.
I shall.
And everyone who's tuned in, everyone who's listened, YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, as always, really do appreciate it. Hope you join us if you are Football Manager fans on Thursday evening, and if not, we will see you next Monday for more Beyond the Touchline. And I'm going to try to nail this outro bang on.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Beyond the Touchline, a Football Manager Central podcast with your hosts, Paul, Ryan, and Colin. We'll catch you next time.
I was close, wasn't I?